My name is Evelyn Carter. For 10 long years, I wore the Navy SEAL uniform with pride. That uniform was more than just fabric. It was my identity, my purpose, my family. But the day I was forced to take it off, it felt like someone ripped away my soul. I still remember that morning. The courtroom smelled like cold air and fear. My hands were shaking as I stood there in front of the military panel. They said I had disobeyed direct orders. They said I had compromised the mission, but none of them knew the truth. I didn't break orders. I broke silence. I told the truth when everyone else wanted to hide it. It started 6 months before the trial. Our SEAL team was deep in Afghanistan, working on a high-risk extraction mission. We were supposed to bring home a captured American contractor, but something went wrong. Our intel was bad, and our captain made a call that cost one of my brothers his life. When I questioned that decision, I was told to stand down. When I tried to report it, I was told to stay quiet. And when I refused to falsify the mission log, they said I was insubordinate. I thought truth would protect me. It didn't. Instead, it destroyed everything I'd built. The day of my hearing, I sat alone at the defense table. No one from my old team showed up. Not even the ones I had saved with my own hands. They all turned away, afraid of being dragged down with me. My lawyer whispered, "Evelyn, if you just say you made a mistake, they might go easy on you." But I couldn't, because I knew, if I lied that day, my friend's death would mean nothing. So I stood up and said, yes, I disobeyed, but I did it to save lives. The room went silent. The judge looked at me with pity. The verdict was already written long before I spoke. Dishonorable discharge. That phrase echoed in my head like a gunshot. My career was gone, my badge of honor stripped away, and the uniform I'd bled for, taken from me like I'd never earned it. When I returned home to Texas, I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would understand. But they didn't, especially my father. He was a retired Marine. Discipline, pride, silence, those were his laws. To him, being discharged dishonorably was worse than death. When I walked into his house, he didn't even look up. He just said, "Take your stuff, Evelyn. You brought shame to this family." Those words cut deeper than any wound I'd ever taken in battle. My mother stood in the corner, tears in her eyes, but she didn't say a word. I left that night, carrying nothing but a small box, a few medals, some letters, and a photo of my team. The same team that betrayed me. For 2 years, I drifted. I tried to get jobs, security, private defense, even warehouse work. But every time they saw dishonorable discharge on my record, the answer was always the same. Sorry, we can't take the risk. People don't see the story behind those words. They only see failure. They only see shame. I lived in a small apartment, worked nights cleaning offices, and spent my days staring at the ceiling, wondering if speaking the truth had been worth it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't regret it, because the man who died that night, he was my brother, and I would rather lose my career than let his name be buried under lies. One evening, as rain poured outside, there was a knock on my door. It was heavy, like someone unsure if they should be there. When I opened it, I froze. It was him, Captain Harris, the same man whose order had cost that life, the same man who'd testified against me in court. He looked older, his eyes tired, his uniform spotless as always. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I need to talk." I should have slammed the door in his face, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to hear him admit it. He sat down in my small living room. The clock ticked, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. "I've lived with that night every day since it happened," he said. I know I made the wrong call. My heart froze. I waited for him to continue. I covered it up because I was scared of losing my command. "You were right to stand against me. You did what I couldn't." I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him that his confession came too late, 2 years too late. But instead I just whispered, "Then why now?" He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter, a recommendation for reinstatement. "I can't erase what happened," he said, "but I can make sure your name isn't buried with mine." That letter opened a door I never thought would open again. But it wasn't easy. The Navy didn't believe it at first. They thought it was pity or guilt. So I fought again. Not on the battlefield, but in rooms filled with lawyers, papers, and politics. Every word I spoke was another step toward reclaiming who I was. Every sleepless night reminded me, truth doesn't die. It just waits for the world to listen. It took 6 months, but finally I got the call. Ms. Carter, your record has been reviewed. You are officially cleared of misconduct. I couldn't breathe. The tears came before the words did. I was free. My name was clean. But my heart, it was still broken. The day I drove back to my parents' house, my hands were trembling. I hadn't spoken to my father in almost 3 years. I didn't know if he'd even open the door. When he did, he looked exactly the same, stern, silent, unreadable. I stood there in uniform again. Not the old one, a new one, fresh, clean, reborn. He stared at the medals, then at me. For a long time, neither of us said a word. Finally, he stepped aside. Dinner's on the table, he said quietly. Don't make your mother wait. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was home again. That night, sitting at the dinner table felt unreal. 3 years had passed since I had last seen this room. The same wooden chairs, the same photo frames on the wall, but everything felt smaller, quieter, like time had stopped here, waiting for me to come back. My mother placed a plate in front of me, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at me the way only mothers can, like she was trying to memorize every line of my face again. My father sat across the table, stiff as ever, his hands clasped together, his eyes fixed on his food. No one spoke for a while. Only the sound of the clock and the soft clinking of cutlery filled the silence. Finally, I broke it. Dad, I'm back on duty. He didn't look up. I saw the papers, he said flatly. Then, after a pause, they cleared your record. Yes, I said. They admitted the mistake. He nodded once, slowly. Then he said the words I never thought I'd hear. You did what I couldn't, Evelyn. You stood your ground. It took me a second to realize what he'd said. All the years of silence, all the anger and disappointment, gone in a single sentence. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, but nothing came out. My mother smiled softly, wiping her eyes. Your father watched your hearing every day, she said. He never missed a word. He looked away, pretending not to hear her, but I saw the emotion in his eyes. He wasn't a man who showed feelings easily, but that night I saw pride, quiet, heavy, honest pride. After dinner, I sat on the porch, looking out into the quiet street. The night air smelled like rain and pine wood. I hadn't realized how much I missed the sound of Texas crickets, the soft hum of peace that doesn't exist on battlefields. My father came out after a while. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets, looking at the same sky I used to stare at as a kid when he told me stories about his time in the Marines. You know, he said, I once disobeyed orders too. I turned to him surprised. He never talked about his past. He smiled faintly. Back in Kuwait, I went against my superior to save my men. They called me reckless, but I knew it was the right call. The difference was, nobody reported me. I stared at him, realizing for the first time that maybe he understood me more than I'd thought. I wasn't brave enough to face what you did, he added. You did. You paid the price for it. That takes guts. For the first time in years, he looked me in the eye and said, I'm proud of you, Evelyn. Those 5 words hit harder than any medal, any honor, any apology. All the pain, all the silence, all the distance, it melted away in that moment. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. The Navy offered me a teaching post, training young recruits at Coronado. It wasn't combat duty, but it was something better, a chance to shape the next generation, to make sure they never had to choose between truth and loyalty the way I did. My first day back in uniform, I stood before a group of fresh faces. Some of them barely out of high school, eager, nervous, ready to prove themselves. I told them my story. Not all of it, but enough. I told them that honor isn't about following every order blindly. It's about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. I told them that bravery isn't found in medals or uniforms, but in moments when no one is watching. when doing the right thing feels like the loneliest path in the world. They listened in silence, and for the first time in years, I felt like my pain had a purpose. One day, after class, I received a letter. It was from Captain Harris. He'd been discharged quietly, retired early, no ceremony, no farewell. Inside the envelope was a short note. Evelyn, I've spent my life leading soldiers into battles, but it was you who showed me what courage really means. Thank you for giving me a chance to do one thing right before it was too late. Harris. I folded the letter and placed it in the same box that held my medals. Because sometimes closure doesn't come from justice, it comes from truth finally being acknowledged. Months passed. My life began to find rhythm again. I started volunteering at a veterans counseling center on weekends, talking to soldiers who came home with more scars inside than outside. They didn't need speeches,